Hey guys, Hugh Sheng here. Welcome to another Starcraft 2 lesson. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a very powerful Terran vs Protoss build loader that's pretty solid for beginners. This is a build that you can use in all the matchups though, you know, if you're anywhere from bronze to gold, let's say. And it should be totally fine. But it is specifically a Terran vs Protoss build loader, so if you're any higher than that, you're going to only want to use this build up in that matchup. And basically what this build loader is going to do is we're going to start out with a expansion, and we're going to transition into a timing attack. And then after the timing attack, we're going to transition into a third command center, and then you can macro from there if you like. So very, very powerful, very beginner friendly, easy to execute build loader. Before we get into that though, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is SiteGround. And SiteGround is a hosting provider. So if you're starting up a new website and you don't have a hosting provider yet, consider checking them out in the comments. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so here we are in a game I played against the AI. This is a replay. And before we get too much into this video though, I just want to say I'm going to try to keep this video as detailed as possible. So it's going to be a lot more beginner friendly. So if you're new to the game, this should be the perfect video for you. But you know, maybe I messed some things up in this video. So if you do have some questions, make sure to leave them in the comments and I'll try to help you out. Okay, first things first, we are making some SCVs as soon as we start the game. And we're going to be grabbing our first building, which is going to be a supply depot. Now, if you're a beginner, you may not know how to read build orders, so I just want to cover that quickly first. We're going to be grabbing this depot on 14 supply. So if you read any build orders, it'll look like this, 14 supply. And basically what that means is that you're going to be looking up here at your supply. There's two supplies because this is a replay. Normally you would just see your supply, in this case the green Terran. And we're going to be getting our depot at 14 supply. So what that means is that this first number is going to say 14. So you basically just keep making SCVs until you get to 14. And it's shorthand, so it's not 14 out of 15, it's just going to be written as 14, but that essentially means 14 out of 15. Okay, with that out of the way, what you're going to do is try to get this SCV to where you want to build a depot, which is going to be either here or here, both are fine. And you're going to build that depot at 14 supply and 100 minerals. So basically exactly when you have the money for that building, you're going to make the depot. So you can see here we're at 14 supply and we're almost at 100 minerals. I'm getting here before I have the money. A common mistake is to grab a guy here when you have 100 minerals and then build your depot. But the problem with that is it takes him quite a long time to get over here. And then your depot is quite late. So make sure you get him here a little early. And then boom, build your depot, 14 supply, 100 minerals. The next thing we're going to do is grab a supply depot on 16. So this will work out so that if you keep building SCVs constantly while the depot is making, by the time it finishes, you should have 16 supply. And a lot of the build is going to be like that. It's just like a really convenient way to memorize the build. But essentially, if you keep building workers and you know you're not missing any and you're not queuing up too many, then everything should line up really, really nicely. So you finish the depot, that gets you to 16 supply, and then you're going to build the barracks on 16. We're also going to build the next gas on 16, so the same supply count. And I do want to point out, because I do get a fair amount of questions from beginners about this, is how the next SCV queued up affects the supply. So basically how it works is the SCV that's actually queued up counts towards the supply. So we're currently at 16 because this guy's building. If you make another SCV, it's not going to count towards the supply until it starts building. So this one will have to finish first. Basically the reason I'm saying this is because we want to build this gas on 16 supply. And so if you queue up another SCV right now, it's going to say 16, but then your gas is actually going to be late because it's not actually starting. So make sure you get your gas and then start building another SCV. And you're not going to skip any by doing that. So you can see here we start the refinery on 16 and then we queue up another SCV. And we still don't miss any, so it's fine. Alright, next thing you're going to be doing is filling up this gas geyser with a couple more SCVs. You kind of want to time it so that it's almost done, but it's not, you know, it didn't just start, but it's also not finished for like 10 seconds. So you can see here I'm sneaking the guys in just before it finishes up, and that way they start mining right away. So some builds, you know, if you're late like 10 seconds, then a lot of things won't line up. Like if you need 50 gas for your first unit, then it might not work correctly because you just didn't get them on time. Just a note, if you know things aren't lining up with another build order, you might want to check that stuff like that. Alright, next thing we're going to be doing is grabbing a orbital command on the command center, and this is going to give you access to quite a few units. Like the orbital command is going to give you access to mules and scans and supply drops, which you shouldn't be using at all unless you get supply blocked. And so this is very useful early on to give us quite a bit more money than SCVs can provide. And we're also going to be grabbing a Marine first or a Reaper. You can do either. I think I do a Marine with this in this replay. I think it's a bit easier for beginners, but depending on your level, you might want to go with a Reaper first, which is going to give you a little more scouting. Generally, I think a lot of people will suggest you get a Reaper, but I actually think it's much better if you're a new player to just focus on your own build. So the Marine is a nice way where we can, you know, get some early defense, and we don't need to worry about what our opponent's doing too much. I totally missed this scout. We're gonna have to go back. That's actually really important. Let's go back a quick sec. Okay, write this in is you want to send an SCV to scout right after you reach 17 supply. Hope they don't miss anything in the rest of this build order. So this is really important because we want to know what our opponent's doing. So, you know, when your gas is building, basically at the same time you're going to put guys on the gas, you're going to send a scouting SCV to see what your opponent's doing. But we're going to keep this super basic. All you're going to be looking for is whether they have an expansion or not, and that's it. Once you get to the higher levels, you can start to look at, you know, what units they're making, what buildings they have, etc. But when you're just learning the game, it's much more efficient time-wise, and you know, you're gonna be safe by focusing on making your own units rather than figuring out what your opponent's doing and then missing all your units and you know, still dying. So so make sure you scout with this SCV, but don't go too deep with the scouting. Just see if they have an expansion, and that's it. All right, let's get back to where we were a little bit. We were just finishing up the barracks, and we're going to get an orbital command, and we're going to start our Marine.
SCV ready.
Oh, one sec. Let me just change my music here, or I'm going to get demonetized on YouTube. Okay, so at this point, we're going to grab our command center on 20 supply. There we go. And what you want to do here is just set your rally point right away so you don't forget later. And you can also use the shift command. So if you have anything, if you have any task being done, you can hold shift and then set up a second task to be executed once the first task is complete. So for example, if you build a command center and you still have this SCV selected, you can hold shift and then right click on the mineral line. And what that does is when the command center finishes building, the SCV will go to the mineral line. So basically you don't have to do that action, or you don't have to remember to do that action later, which is, you know, like a minute down the line. You're never going to remember. Your SCV is just going to be idle and not mining money for you. So build it, hold shift, right click on the mineral line. You should do this for every single building you make. Okay, our Marine finishes up. Our SCV is scouting in the meantime, by the way. So, you know, once you see the command center or nexus or hatchery, just come back home. That's all you need to do. Back at home, where your Marine finishes up, you're going to start a reactor on the barracks, and you're also going to start a depot. I'm going to click on this SCV so you can see what I do once I make the depot. You can see this green line emerge. That happens when you hold shift and then you right click on the mineral line. So that's exactly what we did for the command center as well. And so once this SCV finishes the depot, he's going to go back to the mineral line and start mining.
Grade complete.
Okay, next step, I'm going to lower the depot just so my my SCVs can get out. We're going to start a factory. You're going to start this factory on 22 supply, but more importantly, when your SCVs are not, you're not missing SCVs, and when you have at least 100 gas, you can build this factory. We're also going to send an SCV down here, and we're going to build a bunker.
SCV ready.
You can see again, I'm shifting this back, so just make that a habit. It's a really, really good habit to formulate if you're just starting out.
Add on.
Once your reactor finishes, you're going to start up 2 Marines, and you're going to send those to the front, so you don't forget, so they're not just like idle here. You can set the rally point over here. You can just do that by right-clicking, by the way. You don't have to actually like click this button or anything. And then following that, you're going to grab a refinery on 26. Okay, so your first 3 Marines should finish up. And when your bunker is complete, you're going to put these guys on right away. Next step is going to be putting guys into our gas geyser. And then we're going to start getting a couple more buildings that we need. So first thing, once the factory finishes, which you're going to need to unlock the starport, we're going to grab that right away once that is done. And then you're going to grab a tech lab. So we're going to need this to get some of the units we want to build for safety in a second. So make sure to start that at the same time as the starport. And then you can continue building Marines, but I just want to say that if there are a couple gaps, just because you don't have money, that's totally fine. The way you should think about things is you're prioritizing the SCVs and the buildings over other stuff. So yeah, we do want these Marines, but you don't need to make sure there's like no gaps. Whereas with the SCVs, make sure there are literally no gaps. They're very, very important. Okay. Also, I did change this rally point, by the way. This is a question I get a lot from beginners is, you know, should I keep making SCVs on this command center? Definitely you should, and you should just change both rally points to this base. So all the SCVs are going to come to the second base. Keep building those.
Complete.
SCV ready.
Add.
When the factory completes, you're going to start up a widow mine. You can build this before the tech lab, to be honest. It doesn't really make any difference. But you're going to start that up. And this is going to keep us safe against air units. So very, very safe opening we're doing here. At about 36 to 38 supply, you're going to start up this depot. This is a pretty common depot to forget. So you're going to want to make sure you remember this one. Maybe highlight this one, because this depot is going to be the beginning of building all our depots. Like when this one finishes, we're going to build another one. And when that next one finishes, we're going to build another one. So this first depot is very critical, and it's just one that people forget quite often. So make sure to highlight it. When the starport finishes up, we're going to start up a air unit. You can honestly build pretty much any air unit you want, like out of these first 3. A Liberator, a Medevac, or a Viking. It's not going to make a huge difference, honestly. So build whatever you want. With the Liberator, you can, you know, be a little more aggressive. You can go harass them, but with a Viking, you're going to be a little more safe overall. So yeah, build whatever you want. In this replay, I'm going to build a Viking, just because it's a little more defensive. You're going to die to less attacks. So, but it's up to you. It doesn't make a huge difference either way. So we're going to start up a Viking. After the Widow Mine, we're going to start up a tank. And after this depot finishes up, we're going to start up another depot. Like I said earlier, we're just going to continuously build these depots one after another until we need 2 at a time. So for now, it's 1 at a time. And so when this one finishes, start another one. And when this next one finishes, start another one. All right. Now we're pretty much done with the opening. This first tank and this Viking are going to keep us quite safe, along with the bunker and these extra Marines. So from here, we're going to start transitioning into more of our mid-game plan. Okay, so The stuff we've done so far is just to build up our economy and make sure we're safe. But from this position, we want to start setting up a bit more production to prepare for a big attack. So the first thing we need to do that is 2 more barracks. So maybe in like 5 or 10 seconds, I'm going to grab those. And you want to make sure you place those beside the starport and the factory. I placed these here specifically like this, so there's enough room for these buildings. And the reason you want to put these beside each other is because we're actually going to move these barracks onto these onto this tech lab and onto the tech lab we're going to build from the starport in just a second. And we're going to swap these over because we're going to be able to start our upgrades a little bit faster. Not a lot faster, but definitely noticeably faster. Okay. After you get those, and after your Viking finishes, you're going to start a tech lab. You can see here. And when your first tank finishes, you can swap over the factory. Now, you can make another tank. Most of the high level builds make another tank. If you want to do that first, it's totally fine. I just did it this way because I think it's a little bit more simple for new players. So move the factory over to a tech lab. Move the starport over to a reactor. You can do these at the same time. So these are like our end game add-ons. Like what I mean is we're not going to swap these buildings anymore. So we're just swapping them one time for these tech labs for the barracks, but this starport is going to actually be using this reactor, and this factory is actually going to be using this tech lab. So we're going to be building tanks out of the factory. We're going to be building medevacs out of the starport reactor, and we're going to be building some upgrades on these tech labs for the barracks, and then maybe we'll also use these for building marauders in a little bit. But that's a little more matchup dependent. We'll get into that stuff in a second. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That's a Twitch notification for my stream. If you guys want to check out my stream. Okay. Also, we're going to get a eBay and a refinery. Now, one thing I like to do is combine different buildings, kind of group them up so it's a little bit easier to memorize. So for this thing, what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the eBay at about, I don't know, 430 or about 10 SCV at the second base. And then we're going to grab the eBay and the refinery at the same time, just so we can memorize those. Again, we're also building this depot. I didn't catch this first depot, or this third depot rather, starting. But as you can see, I'm just building one at a time. So make sure you're building one at a time, and then you're going to be totally okay not missing these and not getting supply blocked. Okay, next up is we're going to start up another tank. So when this tech lab finishes, start that up. And then when your barracks are complete, lift them up and place them on these tech labs. Just be careful you get them in the right spot. When your engineering bay completes, you're going to start +1 attack. Attack's a little bit better for Terran because your units fire so quickly. So get the attack upgrade. And you can start up another gas when the mineral line is about 16 out of 16. Okay. Oh, a nice little thing to note is the +1 attack takes about the same time as the stim. So actually a little bit longer. So if you start up your +1 attack first and then you start up stim, they're going to line up really nice for an attack we're going to do later. So make sure that these two upgrades are started about the same time. And then from here on, we're basically set up for our next attack. So we're just going to be building a lot of units, preparing for that. So out of your barracks, you're going to mostly be building Marines at first. We can get Marauders later, but the limitation is our gas. We want to get a lot of gas units right now. So building mostly Marines is going to allow us to get these upgrades, and it's going to also allow us to build tanks and eventually medevacs. So Marine, tank, medevac is pretty ideal for this stage of the game. And a nice tip I can give you guys if you're new is try to queue up these Marines at the exact same time. So I see a lot of people just queue up like, you know, 2 Marines on this barracks and then 1 here later on and then 1 here later on, and they're trying to manage, you know, 3 different buildings, but you can almost think of these as the same building. If you queue up 4 Marines on these buildings, then you just need to queue up 4 more when all these are finished. So try to think of it that way instead of as separate buildings, and it should make the, you know, it should minimize the number of tasks you need to do. Okay.
SCV ready.
Let's queue up another tank since this one's almost complete.
Add-on complete.
And we're going to get the combat shields next.
Ready to go.
And just pay attention, the starport is finished, but I'm going to start up my starport units last. That's like the least important thing you need for your army. So make sure to prioritize this combat shield. It's pretty common to like forget combat shield and start up medevacs because your starport is complete. So pay attention to that. Make sure you have all these upgrades first. And then begin pumping out your units. And we're pretty much done the build, to be honest. Last thing you're going to be doing is adding on a 3rd command center. And then when your upgrades are all finished, you're going to push out and attack. So pretty straightforward, simple build order, at least as far as StarCraft build orders go. I mean, if you're new to the game, this is going to be quite a lot to memorize, but it's certainly a lot easier than some of the other builds. So hopefully you found this guide helpful. If you did, leave a comment, subscribe, and like the video. And of course, check out the sponsor of this video again, which is SiteGround. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.